Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. When governments or clients make decisions that affect your business, the idea of taking action in compliance can be daunting. But that doesn't have to be the case. Director of Unravelling Red Tape, Elaine Abery, has spent her career battling the bureaucracy on behalf of businesses. And she says making change is possible, so long as you're persistent and polite. Elaine starts by describing the nature of her business to Jeff Waters.
Sometimes I also help when they're dealing with large businesses, when they just get caught up in the red tape and the bureaucracy. So I've helped people deal with big banks, big rental organisations, like the car rental organisations, where somehow it just got lost in translation somewhere. But mainly it is government.
So it sounds like you are a private ombudsman of a sort.
I've never heard that before, but I guess I don't have the power to make any decisions. I'm certainly not employed by government. I'm employed by whoever the business is, a charity or not-for-profit that I'm working for. But yeah, it's about going back to, and sometimes the thing is, I worked in government for a long time, so I know what's possible and I know what they can do. And sometimes it's about going back to government and they say, we can't do this. And I go, well, actually you can.
So give us some examples of what sorts of obstacles you've helped businesses overcome.
So what tends to happen quite frequently is government's making a new law or they're making a decision. They'll talk to all the big players because the big players have people like me, and that's what I used to do, employed full-time to talk to government about this stuff. So they'll talk to them. And generally, one of the questions they ask is, how will this impact small business? And the big businesses will go, well, not really, or it might impact them a little bit, but it'll impact us more. Or small businesses and smaller organisations don't really figure on the radar of bigger organisations. It's not necessarily that they're trying to do bad stuff for small businesses, although every large corporation, of course, is self-interested and wants themselves to do better and not necessarily anyone else. But what will happen is the smaller organisations they'll just be lost in it. So one example we had was government they were doing a decision in budget. It was around money and things. And they talked to the bigger organisations. The bigger organisations said, yeah, and this thing, it'll be fine because the people doing this, well, they shouldn't be doing it anyway. And those people became my client. There's only just over 100 of them in Australia. And because they're so specialised, nobody really understands what they do, which was the problem, I think. I don't know. I'm not in the minds of the larger organisation that was talking to government. So they came to me and they said, look, Elaine, what can we do about this? Government's announced this budget. We've written them letters, but we're not hearing back from them. And basically we feel like we were targeted or we've been dealt with really badly. So it was about going back to government. Now, one of the things with government is, like everyone, you don't necessarily like finding out that something you put a lot of time and effort into was wrong. So part of it's about piquing government's interest. And sometimes it will take a few months actually to get them interested because they're like, we hear this all the time and everyone says they don't like what we do. But after it's settled in a bit, it'll be okay. And it just takes time. A lot of it just takes time. You can't be impatient with government. You've got to understand they've got to go through processes and they can do it as quickly as they can, but they've got to involve other departments. They've got to involve ministers. So part of it was that, and they just didn't want to go through that again. But just kept engaging with them, kept ringing them up once a month saying, look, this is the problems. And it's about those dot points. It's about saying, well, this is what you did and this is how it's impacting people in the real world. And in this case, it would likely have meant that because the budget impacted so heavily on this very specialised area of the profession, that people would stop wanting to do this very specialised thing and stop wanting to study for it. So you would have possibly lost that entire profession and people would have had to go overseas for it. And that's what we were seeing, people going, what's the point of studying this or what's the point of doing this? I can just go back and do the less well specialised thing and get paid more for it. So I went back and had that conversation with government, and the very next budget, government turned it around and said, okay, we'll essentially, it's a bit complicated because in the budget process, they can't reverse a decision, but they can make a new decision which effectively reverses it. So they effectively reversed it. And since then, what's happened is because we've established that really good relationship with government, we're going back to them and saying, well, actually, there's these aspects of the profession where we're doing extra work and we'd like more remuneration. Is there a way we can work with you to look at how that might happen? So from that previous work, from the relationship that we built, and we've always been completely honest. So even if something isn't necessarily in your best interest to tell government, they're going to find out. It's like, you know, everyone's got their lie detector going on in their head. So just tell it, own it, say, look, this is how it works. If you don't like it, we'll have a look at how we can change it, but let's work together on this. So just being really cooperative with them. But it can be really hard just getting that door open in the first place and knowing how to deal with them. And as I said, always dot points, one page to give them to go away with so that they remember, so that they don't get you mixed up with the next person they were talking to who might have been really angry and aggressive. You don't want to be mixed up with them. You want to give them something. They go, oh, yeah, I had that piece of paper from them. They can always go back to it.
You mentioned opening doors to the bureaucracy, and for many small business or medium-sized enterprise owners, that seems an insurmountable task. Which door do I open? Which building do I go to open that door? What would you tell people? Is this actually achievable, and what steps should they take to achieve it?
So the first thing I'd say is don't start with the minister, because what happens is things get lost in translation. So they're going down the hierarchy and up the hierarchy and down the hierarchy.
So how do they find out where to go in the bureaucracy?
So often you've got a good idea of which department it is. So you ring that department. If you go on the internet, you can find the switch numbers for any department and just say, look, who's the section that deals with, okay, so an example. During COVID, what happened was a lot of the governments, the COVID small business assistance, you had to turn over at least $75,000 a year in order to qualify. Now, I think it's 83% off the top of my head of small businesses turn over under $100,000. So a lot of small businesses didn't qualify for that. So what I did was I thought, okay, who deals with these people? And I thought, well, New South Wales has got a small business ombudsman. So I rang the small business ombudsman and said, hey guys, how does this work? Because you're excluding most small businesses. And the initial person said, oh, no, that's the rules. And I said, well, can I talk to your policy person? And so I had to ring back a couple of times saying I need to talk to the policy division or the policy person. And I talked to the policy person. I said, well, what are you doing for people who turn over between $30,000 and $75,000 a year? And they said, well, actually, that's a good point. And they came back and announced the micro business grants, which weren't as generous as the grants for people who turn over $75,000 a year, but something's always better than nothing. So sometimes it's just about persistence, and sometimes you just get the wrong person on the phone. Like sometimes you get someone on the phone who's having a bad day or who just doesn't believe anyone should be able to talk to anyone apart from them. I don't know. Sometimes it's just a matter of going, okay, well, thanks for your help, and ringing back on another day or a different time of the day, and hopefully, and usually you'll get somebody different, say, okay, let's start again. Can I talk to your policy person? Because what I do is effectively called policy. It's public policy. And that's the decisions government makes is called public policy.
So you're saying that as an individual small business owner, I have the power to do this?
You do.
Do you see many individuals doing it by themselves?
No.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's like a lot of things. Partly people are scared. They're scared they might get targeted for audit. Partly it's just so hard. Like you're talking a different language. And it is a different language. You're talking the practical language of a small business person who just wants things done and just wants to be able to basically get home to see their family and sleep at night, because we all know small business owners don't get a lot of that stuff. And you've got the bureaucrat who sit there and they're paid. They're paid no matter what the outcome. Like we're not paid for our conversations we have with government. But it's actually costing us money. So there's all that stuff going on, and sometimes it just gets lost in translation, and it's the persistence, but it's also being polite and things. And sometimes it's just not using the right words. But I've seen people who were very persistent with things And if you look at what we call the tampon tax, that was just a group of women who said this is unfair that we have the GST on tampons but not on essentially adult nappies and things like that. And they just kept going, and they went on the internet, and they just had the time and the energy as a group to do it. And a lot of it is a lot of small business owners, you just don't have the time and the energy, or we just get really frustrated really quickly, and it doesn't work with anyone. If I start yelling at you, you're just going to hang up.
That was Elaine Abery, Director of Unravelling Red Tape. To find out how you can navigate business and legislative change, head to unravellingredtape.com.au or to the link in the show notes of this episode. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.